Hey there, how you doing? Hope you're well. This is a little awkward. I'm used to doing these monologues in front of a live studio audience in Hollywood. It's like we're in this weird place where coronavirus themes or jokes aren't funny. And it's not that they're offensive, but seemingly every other edgelord DJ and producer uploaded a COVID-19 mix to SoundCloud or YouTube, and y'all ruined it. So now I'm just like, yeah, I'll avoid the topic altogether. But now you and I are like a couple laying in bed after sexual dysfunction. So yeah, that's a thing we probably have to deal with. And it's going to be okay, probably. And you know, what else is there to say about it right now? I guess just, it's one of those, you know, check out this really insane hardware tracker. If you were making electronic music in the 1990s, you can most likely skip past this part. What is a tracker? A tracker is an alternative and different and rather peculiar way of making music, especially if you're used to like a DAW or a score or a piano roll. Instead of going left to right and programming notes on a chromatic scale, you're going from top to bottom and programming notes in things called steps, and then a bunch of perimeters in a more matrixy way. Different trackers have different perks, but generally, each track is not limited to one voice the way it would be in a standard DAW. With each single step, you can change the voice. For example, if I wanted to play a C major 7th chord that is 4 different notes, I would have to use 4 different tracks to do it. And that could be on step 1. But step 2 could be 4 different instruments. This is both powerful and limiting at the same time, and that results in a pretty radically different structure of songwriting. The first tracker was called the Ultimate Sound Tracker, and it was released for Amiga 33 years ago, and its purpose was to give musicians or game makers a tool to create music for their games. Not long after this, the top-down format got pretty popular with game composers and more pieces of software started coming out. The Fairlight CMI even had a tracker. So fast forward a little bit to the 1990s, computers are now powerful enough to handle CD quality audio and sampling, and trackers are kind of taken off. You have Scream Tracker and Fast Tracker, which can handle 32 tracks at once, and this point in time is when I first started hearing about them. For those of you under the age of 30, let me tell you a little bit about the early 90s. The internet existed, but it was very, very slow. So slow that an image the size of 320 by 240 pixels took a tantalizingly long time to load. A file the size of an MP3 was way too big to be practically sent from one person to another, and a MIDI file sounded different depending on the sound card you played it on. So this sort of slow data trickle and the growing community of the internet brought together a bunch of really talented developers and artists to create what is now referred to as the demo scene. So you know how you'll have an update for Photoshop or a VST plugin or something, and every single new version uses more RAM and runs slower despite not having that many new features? The demo scene is the polar opposite of that. The whole point of it is to cram as much data into a program as possible at a competitive level, and it's fucking incredible. The video you see and the music you hear right now is an executable file that is 4 kilobytes. 4 kilobytes. It doesn't require any DLLs or plugins or libraries. It just runs on 4 kilobytes. Now, a thumbnail that you might see next to this video is about 75 times larger in file size than this 5-minute audio video presentation in high definition. I don't want to get too far into the demo scene here. There are tons of resources where you can learn about, browse, or participate in it all over the internet, including on YouTube. These demos needed the audio and music to be as competitively efficient as the video rendering, and a great way to accomplish that was using mod files. A mod file is a bit like a MIDI file, except that it also includes instruments, waveforms, samples, and so on, and trackers became synonymous with mod files. And if you were making anything for the demo scene, you were most likely using Fast Tracker 2. Moving into the late 90s and 2000s, trackers kind of became associated, at least in my head, with American IDM. Artists like Venetian Snares and Machine Drum were pretty much only using trackers to make music at the time. And then artists like Deadmau5, for example, started with trackers and then moved on to other things. As Ableton and Fruity Loops FL Studio came around, they kind of filled in that gap between trackers and DAWs, which I think attracted a lot of people to trackers, and trackers actually slipped in popularity a little bit. However, that being said, there's a very powerful tracker called Renoise that has a massive user base, and it's pretty popular. I'd venture to say that trackers are are the overwhelmingly popular choice for chiptune musicians, especially considering that LSDJ and other homebrew carts are actual trackers that run on Game Boy consoles. So where does that leave Moi? Well, the last time I can remember formally using a tracker was to make the track that you're hearing now, and that was over 18 years ago. And to be completely honest, trackers never really appealed to me because my musical journey kind of started with jazz charts and improv, and this is just sort of the opposite of that. So when Polyend sent me this bad boy to check out, my expectations were a little conflicted. On one hand, I have been ignoring trackers for most of my professional life, and on the other hand, every single thing that Polyend has ever sent me has gone beyond this YouTube channel and worked its way into my musical workflow as a professional musician. So what you're about to see is not a tracker musician or a tracker expert showing you the first hardware tracker. About 2 weeks ago, I was akin to an ape being handed an iPhone, but the UI actually dulled the learning curve quite a bit, and this is pretty easy to learn and get around on and make some tracks with, and so I'm pretty comfortable to show you how it works. I think it's gonna go okay. Before I begin, let's go over the specs. And it's safe to say that the hardware specs are gonna be pretty much the same because this comes out in a few months. The software specs are going to be improved upon as this is a beta version. So we have an output that doubles as a headphone jack. It comes with a little connector to facilitate that. Has a line in, has a mic in, has a MIDI in, a MIDI out, has a micro SD card slot, and then it has a USB-C power slot. This thing doesn't actually take that much power, and I was able to power it using one of those little phone bank chargers for, well, it didn't even get to 50% battery out by the time I was done making music on it after an hour or so. So it's safe to say that this is pretty easy to power portably. The unit's really sturdy with a metal build, I think. This is metal, or this is like the most hardcore plastic I've ever seen, but I think it's metal. I'm gonna stick with metal. It has mechanical keys. This is not a touchscreen, and initially I was craving a touchscreen, but after using it for about a minute and seeing how the workflow works, the only time I would actually touch the screen would be by accident, so actually thank God it's not a touchscreen. Inside we have loads of envelopes and LFOs and ways to modulate the instruments, and the instruments can be made up of samples, loops, waveforms, slices, grains from a granulator, and of course, like any good old school tracker, wavetables. There is an onboard FM radio, and I know that some of you are baseball fans and you're gonna wanna take a break from music and think about that sweet smell of grass and crack of the bat and listen to the game, but you can also sample things from it or make wavetables from it right out of thin air. The effects list is pretty big and it keeps growing, and that applies from everything from sends to the sample editor all the way to per step, which is probably the most important, and you'll see why soon. One of the most unique and my favorite attributes to the tracker is the option for random probability and the performance mode, which allows you to make generative music. If you're not used to trackers and you're just looking at this like it's a groove box or something, one thing you might be grumbling about is the lack of multiple outs. However, with the tracker workflow, you have to understand that like channel 1 could be a kick drum for that first step, and the second step it could be a hi-hat, and the third step it could be a snare. And if you keep changing these instruments on a per step basis, like you're generally supposed to with the tracker, that's how it's most powerful, then you kind of lose the point of having multiple outs, because you would want a kick drum multiple out to sidechain a bass from another instrument or something like that. Well, it's a little different. That being said, if you are attached to this workflow for some reason, such as you always like having the kick drum separate when you're mastering or compressing a final mix, you have the option of leaving one of your channels to be only the kick drum, and then the tracker actually exports stems, which you can just drag and drop off the SD card into a session elsewhere. All right, enough yapping. Let's play with this thing and yap over there. This is the tracker, and a heads up, there might be a little bit of background noise here because it's 90 degrees in Georgia today and I am not closing my window. Another thing you should know, this is still in beta. It's not a finished product. So like most trackers, at its heart, this is a sampler, and it actually has an FM radio on it.
The great thing about facts, they're...
Now, I'm going to try and scroll through this and not get copyrighted music. Let's see if we could do that. Also, I have pretty terrible radio reception. I'm in a basement studio that's like padded by multiple walls, so this works a lot better upstairs. This sounds like some good sports talk.
This is day 16 of the NBA suspension in play, with a restart date still very unclear. All 30 team facilities have been shuttered, so Hawks coach Lloyd Pierce says he's being creative and trying to remain connected to...
Okay, so We just took this little bit here. So I went back and I loaded the entire sample here, and basically these little pads, we could do that, and we could also use a MIDI keyboard. Also, there's a bunch of different levels of undo here, like a ridiculous number of undo levels. It's pretty great. So
Being creative.
actually, I am going to put an amplifier on there
Being creative.
because I want it to be nice and loud for when I go to sample playback. Now, this is where things get really interesting. I could do a forward loop,
Being creative. Being creative.
do backwards loop, ping
Being
pong loop.
creative. It ain't your being creative. It ain't your
When you get into the higher notes, that actually can be useful. But I could also slice it up, in which we'll do that with a beat later. Wavetable. This is where we get really interesting here. I'm going to press instrument. I'm going to tune it down a bit. I'm also going to put a low pass filter on there. And a little bit of resonance. Then I'm going to go into this little envelope section here where I can have a modulator, whether it be an envelope or an LFO, on my wavetable position or my granular position if I use the granulator, which we'll get into in a minute. Also panning and volume, but for right now, cut off. So let's do that. Also, there's a reverb send, and there may be some more effect sends, and currently the reverb is literally just a placeholder. This isn't the algorithm that'll be in the finished product, so this is just a beta thing. It's not really all that beautiful sounding yet, and you won't hear this one if you buy this. So now we got a tracker, and let's start tracking. So basically, each time I press this note, it's going to go down a step, so... All right, let's hear it. Not bad. Let's load some kick drums. Ooh, that sounds about right. All right, let's get some snares up in here. And as you can see, once you get used to this, the workflow is actually mighty fast. And remember, any of these samples that I load here can be... And remember, any of these samples that I load here can be modified in that previous sample editing system that we have, where you could even extract the wavetable, or you could even get granular with it. Let's get a hi-hat. These are all just XOX boxes. I suppose that'll work. And let's go back to our pattern. So now I'm going to change the instrument to a kick. And let's say I just want to kick every 4 steps. All right, and this one will be my snare. And let's just do the standard 4 on the floor. We're going to now have a snare every 8 steps. Here we have a hi-hat. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these all the way down to the 32nd step, and I'm going to go to fill. And let's fill each 2 constant with instrument 4, and go. And now, that was very easy. Now we can just have... I'm a silly boy. I forgot that last snare. Let's put that guy in there, and maybe we could just... So let's get a little more interesting. We have these little effects here for each step. So let's put a roll. These are probably the easiest to show off. A little roll in here. And the roll effect, basically, you can hear, gives you a little example of what it's doing in each one. So we could do that. Maybe here we could have it like that. You can get really, really glitchy sounding with this stuff. So in addition to that, we can have another effect. We could have, let's say, chance, right? So chance is exactly what it sounds. Here is a 51% chance that this sound will play. Also, you could use the pad so you don't have to rotate to your setting each time. So now we have something that's getting a little bit generative. And let's play with this instrument a little bit to make it a little more tolerable sounding. Let's add some effects to our melody channel. So here's glide. See how that sounds? So we could add that all over the place. Ooh, we could edit our wavetable position if you want to get really, really goofy. Let's just randomize this. Oh, you know what we can do actually? If you want to get really, really, really goofy with this, we could press Shift. We could go all the way down. Maybe actually be able to do this with the knob, but I'm hardcore. And press Fill. Let's go random. The random effect that we're going to do is wavetable position. We're going to go random from 1 to 100, and then we're going to fill that. Boom. So obviously this isn't mixed very well, so let's kind of tidy up some of these samples here. And then you'll notice in that odd wavetable thing that's going on that was just random, some parts are a little bit louder than others. So let's actually put a limiter over this whole thing. And we also have a bit depth. So if we want to make it 8-bit or 4-bit, but let's stick with 16. So we have 4 more tracks to use, so let's load another sample, why don't we? This is just a library of wavetables that I have. I kind of want something to be a little bassier. I want to put maybe a bass line under this whole thing, so let's tune it down. And we'll want to put a low-pass filter on that again. Oh, that's a high-pass filter, silly. There we go. Okay, so now our song sounds a little bit more spatially fun, and that sample actually has an LFO modulating it every 2 steps rather than inserting that just to, I guess, be different. And finally, let's put in a lead, why don't we, on the 6th channel. Yeah, a good square, that'd be nice. Wonderful. Let's actually try some real-time recording. I'm gonna hold down record and play. It was a little bit too early on that one, yeah. So that's not really the best song in the world, but that's generally how you make a pattern. Let me open some other things that I've made. Here's a song. So a song mode basically plays a bunch of different patterns. Here are the patterns. Tons of patterns. And the song mode plays them all in the order in which you define. This one's 175 BPM. Can you guess what genre this would be? I would guess jungle. Did you know that eating 1 egg per day is as harmful as being a full-time cigarette smoker? Did you know that cows contribute more to global warming than every single thing else on Earth combined? Did you know that eating a high-fat and low-carb diet is an effective treatment for asthma, autism, and cancer? Did you know that the infamous double-slit experiment enables assholes like this to have magic healing powers? People have been asking Netflix and other streaming services for a really long time to sort of up the bar and the standards of what they consider educational or documentary, and it's fallen on deaf ears. But in the meantime, I'm really glad to be a partner with CuriosityStream. CuriosityStream is like the Netflix of documentaries, and they have it on virtually any platform that you can think of. Right now they have series on dark matter, dark energy, astrophysics, quantum computing, and that's just physics. Those are the things that I'm really into for some reason. They also have massive troves of content on biology, geology, genetics, evolution, history. I've actually been a subscriber to CuriosityStream before this partnership began. I absolutely love it, and it's really cheap. It's $20 a year. And they have a monthly option as well. If you click that link down there, you can get a free trial, and you can also help support this channel in the process. So stay inside, stay healthy, stay sane and entertained while you stay inside, and get smarter while you're doing it. Click the link below. So as promised, I will show off some of that granular stuff too. So let's load a sample that is not a simple wavetable. Let's load, I think I put some rap samples on here. Let's go through some rap one-shots.
Bumbaclot. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fucking models.
That's a really happy guy.
Pussy. Shorty. Shouty. Sean. Call me Slick Rick.
Yeah, okay, let's go with that one. All right, Slick Rick. Let's hit the granular slopes here, buddy. All right, so I'm gonna make this granular. All right, Sick Rick.
Call me Slick.
Or Slick Rick, rather. If you want to make this not as abrasive, you can go to triangle or Gauss. Triangle sounds like Gauss sounds like. You can also have it ping pong, which also helps with that. So like triangle. So this gets kind of insane, as you can hear. Okay, so that's our sample, right? And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to record a little pattern. I don't even know. I guess I'll just use that. Let's select all of these, and then we can go to fill, and that fill can be, let's go each one. So each one's going to be a random, how about position? And again, random from 1 to 100. That is where it's picking the random from, and fill. And let's hear that. We could even play with this live. And again, we could bring in some envelopes, whatever you call them. So now let's play with a drum loop, which is something we have not done yet. And I'm not a huge fan of loops myself, but I know that a lot of people are, and so I've brought in a couple here. Let's see, breaks, classics. Ooh, amen. That's a great one, right? All right, so we have amen here, and we can make it a slice. We can have it auto slice. And now we have... That did a really good job at auto slicing that, by the way. So FYI, as of right now, you have pitches instead of slices per different pad. I actually emailed them about that, and I do believe that you will have the option to choose slices by the time this comes out or in a further firmware update, but it doesn't really matter because you can do it another way that is quite possibly a little bit more clever. So first of all, let's just use that handy fill option to fill all of these with a note, and that note can be fill each one with a constant note, and that's pretty easy. And that note should probably be C5. All right. So as an effect, we can actually choose where the slice goes, right? We can either choose the knob or we can use the pads then. So let's find, we could go back and change all these. I'm just finding where we're at. Let's hear it. Hear the roll will be really fun. And if we actually wanted to split this up into different samples and use different instruments, you could actually then go and use a lot of different effects like that. This is actually a pattern I made with the goal of making a delay like they used to do on Fast Tracker 2. This is the original one, and then I added these in here. Oh, that's a drum thing. So we have two little delay lines. You can see over here, and they're just sort of copying each other. Also, this is a good example of how chords could work. create an entirely generative pattern. So let's try to do that. So I guess the first thing we would do is we'd go to fill, and we would fill each one with, let's just say something on the Dorian scale. And I'm going to go with random from maybe C4 to C6. And let's see how that works. So now I'm going to go press effects, and I'm going to mess with that chance all the way down. And let's try and just find like a 50% all the way down. And now there's a 50% chance that each one of these steps will play. Cool. And I guess just for the sake of making this sound a little bit more diverse, I guess I'll pan or maybe affect the cutoff a little bit differently on each one of these notes. So on this channel, let's use the exact same sound, and let's select all again. And I'm going to fill every 4 notes, so each 4, in the Dorian scale, random from, let's go down to like C3, and let's go up to maybe, I don't know, G4 or something. All right, and let's try that. Maybe that's a little bit too low, but we could also tune this entire thing up higher. So this one, I'm going to fool with the panning a little bit. So let's just set the panning to center for each one. Or 1, that's not going to be a noticeable amount of panning. Now in FX2, I'm going to have a random effects value. So now all of the panning is going to be random for each step every single time. So let's do one more little like counterpoint overture here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill it with a note. Let's go with each one. Let's sort of do the same thing we've been doing, maybe a little bit higher. Okay, fill. So what's happening here is we actually have this affecting the filter LFO. And there's a 4% chance that the third channel will play a note. This sounds a little silly. I should probably make these a little slower, eh? You can also randomize the instrument you're using per step, randomize a lot of different effects. So this is very, very capable of making either semi-generative or pretty much completely generative music. Performance mode allows you to play different patterns for each track. So if I were to, for example, have 8 different patterns that all had different lengths, then you could make a pretty radical polyrhythmic sequence. So that is the Polyend tracker in its current pre-release state. You can sample pretty much anything you want, either through the input or FM radio. You have both a mic and a line-in input. You can manipulate those samples. You could grab wave tables from those samples. You can grab slices or grains from those samples. You can edit them, and then you can do crazy things in the sequencer with them, and you can make finished tracks. Now again, some of you are probably saying, well, I can't really make a complete track on this because it doesn't have multiple outs, but have no fear. You could just export stems for each single pattern, and then you can do all of your post-production in a DAW if you want to be that, I guess, pro about things. I, of course, understand that exporting WAV file stems of your tracks does not entirely negate the usefulness of having multiple outs, but we're talking about a portable device here, and I think that it's a pretty good trade-off for what you're getting. That is the tracker, and Polyend actually surprised me a little bit with the pricing. It is on pre-order for $599 US, and for a sampler, sequencer, synthesizer, just an overall performance box, that's a pretty damn good price. The closest piece of hardware that does this in this sort of price area would be the Digitact, which is not nearly as innovative, not as featured, and it still costs a couple $100 more. After a couple weeks of just sort of casually playing with this thing around the house, weirdly, I think the closest thing that I would compare it to is a Teenage Engineering Op1. And while they're both very different groove boxes, I guess you could say, if you're going to categorize them that way, they both are very innovative, they're both very addictive, and they're both very powerful. The goal is us just losing ourselves and losing hours of time while playing and creating music. And that should be the goal of literally every piece of music gear, right? That being said, if I'm gonna make that comparison, then I have to say that the Op1 is 9 years old. It's not gonna be as powerful. It is definitely not as well built as the tracker, and it costs over twice as much as the tracker costs. And to be totally honest, I'd rather be quarantined with the tracker. If you enjoyed what you saw here, if you learned anything, subscribe to the channel. If there's anything you want me to cover in the future, let me know in the comments. If you're looking for something new to listen to, I just released a full-length album. I'll link to it in the description below. And of course, if you want to support this channel, and if you want to get smarter while you're staying inside during this quarantine and stay entertained, then check out Curiosity Stream. The link's right down there. Bye.